I'm Emilio, 32, a software engineer whose parents have forgotten my birthday every year since I was 7. Growing up, I learned to swallow disappointment while watching my sister receive endless celebration. Last week, after years of grinding in silence, I posted a photo of my new $98,000 Tesla on Instagram. Within hours, my phone rang. It was my father, who hadn't called in months, demanding to know where I got the money and insisting on a family meeting. They had no idea what was coming. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to create your own happiness. I grew up in a modest brick house in a middle-class neighborhood just outside Boston. From my earliest memories, our family dynamic was clear. My sister Heather, 3 years older, was the star around whom our family orbited. My parents, Richard and Maria, built their lives around her achievements, her needs, and her future. I was the afterthought, the extra chair at the dinner table. The first birthday they forgot was my 7th. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, carefully dropping hints about the new Lego set I wanted. Mom had promised chocolate cake with blue frosting, my favorite. The morning of my birthday, I woke up early and rushed downstairs expecting balloons or at least a card on the table. Instead, I found my parents frantically helping Heather prepare her science fair project that was due that day. "Good morning, honey," Mom said absently, gluing a piece of cardboard to my sister's display board. I stood in the doorway in my pajamas waiting for the birthday wishes. They never came. "Is there something special today?" I finally asked, my voice small. Mom looked confused for a moment, then her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Emilio, your birthday. I'm so sorry, sweetie, but Heather's science fair is today, and we're running late." Dad barely looked up from the paper he was helping Heather write. "We'll do something this weekend, bud." We never did. By Sunday, it was forgotten. That set the pattern for years to come. My 8th birthday fell on the same day as Heather's piano recital, no contest there. For my 10th, they actually bought a cake, but left it in the refrigerator untouched, when an unexpected dinner invitation from one of Dad's colleagues came up. My 12th birthday was completely overshadowed by Heather's acceptance into an elite summer program. The contrast between our celebrations was painful to witness. Heather's birthdays were marked with elaborate parties, expensive gifts, and dozens of photos. My parents would spend weeks planning, inviting her friends, decorating the house. For her 16th birthday, they rented a venue and hired a DJ. 2 months later, on my 13th birthday, they ordered a pizza and left me alone to eat it when an emergency parent-teacher conference about Heather's college prospects came up. It was around this time, at 12 years old, that I found my escape in computer programming. My school had just received a donation of new computers, and our tech teacher, Mr. Wilson, noticed my interest. He gave me books on basic coding and stayed after school to teach me simple programs. I still remember the first time I made a computer do exactly what I wanted. It was a simple program that displayed "Hello World," but I felt a rush of power I'd never experienced before. In those strings of code, I found control I lacked everywhere else. Computers didn't forget me. They didn't have favorite children. They responded exactly as they should when I gave the right commands. While my parents attended Heather's debate competitions and field hockey games, I taught myself JavaScript, then Python, then C++. My bedroom became my sanctuary, filled with programming books and notebooks full of code I'd written. I'd stay up late into the night, the blue light of my monitor the only illumination, creating increasingly complex programs. When I was 14, I entered a local programming competition without telling my parents. I won first place with a simple app that helped organize study schedules. The event organizer called our house to congratulate my parents on raising such a talented son. "I think you have the wrong number," my mother said, before I could grab the phone from her. "My son doesn't do computer competitions." I showed them the trophy later that night. My father glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Emilio," before turning back to helping Heather with her college applications. High school continued this pattern. While Heather called home regularly from Harvard with updates that my parents shared proudly with neighbors and friends, I spent most of my time alone in the computer lab or my room. I developed advanced programming skills, creating my own projects and joining online communities where my abilities were recognized and valued. By senior year, I had taught myself enough to be offered a part-time job, doing website development for local businesses. I didn't tell my parents about this. What was the point? When report cards came, my straight A's were acknowledged with a distracted, "Good job, son," while Heather's A- in a single class warranted hours of discussion and concern. My high school graduation fell 3 days after Heather's college graduation. We attended her ceremony as a family, my parents beaming with pride, taking hundreds of photos, hosting a lavish party afterward. For my graduation, they arrived 10 minutes late, stayed just long enough to see me walk across the stage, missing the announcement of my honors status, and left immediately after to prepare for a dinner celebrating Heather's new job offer. That night, alone in my room, surrounded by coding books and the unmentioned achievement of graduating third in my class, I made myself a promise I would build a life so remarkable they would have to notice. Not for their approval, I was beginning to understand, that was a hollow pursuit, but for my own vindication. Getting into MIT should have been the moment my parents finally saw me. My acceptance letter arrived on a rainy April afternoon, and for once I couldn't contain my excitement. I rushed into the living room where my parents were watching television. I got into MIT for computer science. I announced the letter, trembling in my hand. My father muted the TV. "That's great, son. How much is it going to cost?" That was it. No celebration, no pride, just immediate concern about money. The same money that had never been questioned when it came to Heather's education. "I got a partial scholarship," I explained. "It covers about 60% of the tuition." My mother frowned. "That's still a lot of money, Emilio. Your sister's student loans are already such a burden on us." The message was clear. There would be no help from them. Despite having contributed significantly to Heather's Harvard education, they viewed my MIT tuition as an unnecessary expense. "I'll figure it out," I said quietly, folding the letter and walking back to my room. And I did. I took out loans for what the scholarship didn't cover. I found 2 part-time jobs, one at the campus library and another doing freelance coding projects. Between classes, work, and sleep, I barely had time to breathe, but I maintained a 3.9 GPA throughout my freshman year. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Lawrence in my advanced algorithms class. Unlike most professors who saw me as just another student, he recognized something in my work. After class one day, he asked me to stay behind. "You have a unique approach to problem-solving, Emilio," he said, pointing to my latest assignment. "Have you considered research as a career path?" That simple question led to a mentorship that would change my life. Professor Lawrence became the first adult who truly saw my potential. He invited me to join his research team, gave me challenging projects, and actually listened to my ideas. Under his guidance, I published my first academic paper at 20, an achievement my parents acknowledged with a brief "TI. That's nice" when I mentioned it during a rare phone call. In my junior year, I was assigned a new roommate named Jason, after my previous one transferred schools. Jason came from a large, close-knit family in Connecticut, and he couldn't comprehend my relationship with my parents. "Wait, they forgot your birthday again?" he asked incredulously, after I received no call on my 20th birthday. "Dude, that's not normal." When Thanksgiving approached, and I mentioned I'd be staying on campus to work, Jason insisted I come home with him. "Nobody should be alone on Thanksgiving," he declared, brooking no argument. That Thanksgiving with Jason's family was a revelation. His parents, Angela and Robert, welcomed me like another son. His 3 siblings included me in their inside jokes and family games. They asked about my studies with genuine interest. When I mentioned my research paper, Angela asked thoughtful questions about it. I found myself talking more at that dinner table than I had in years at my own. Before we left, Angela hugged me tight. "You're always welcome here, Emilio," she said. "Any time." I returned to campus with a new understanding of what family could be. It made the continued neglect from my own parents both more painful and somehow less important. I began to see that perhaps I could build my own sense of belonging elsewhere. The pattern with my parents continued, though. My 21st birthday brought particular pain. They had actually promised to visit a rare occurrence, and I'd allowed myself to hope. I cleaned my apartment, researched restaurants where we could celebrate, even bought new clothes for the occasion. 2 days before my father called. "Something's come up with Heather," he said without preamble. "She needs help moving into her new apartment in New York this weekend. We won't be able to make it." I sat on the edge of my bed phone, pressed to my ear. "It's my 21st birthday, Dad." There was a pause. "I know, son, and I'm sorry, but your sister needs us." I didn't bother to point out that Heather's emergency could have waited a day or two. Instead, Jason and his girlfriend took me out that night, and Professor Lawrence and his wife invited me to dinner the following evening. They sang "Happy Birthday" and presented me with a cake. Professor Lawrence gave me a vintage book on early computing history. To one of the brightest minds I've had the privilege to teach, the inscription read, "My graduation from MIT came with highest honors and a job offer from a promising startup in San Francisco. My parents did attend the ceremony but left immediately after to beat traffic, missing the department reception where I received a special award for innovation. They didn't see Professor Lawrence pull me aside to tell me how proud he was, or Jason's parents insisting on taking dozens of photos of me in my cap and gown. My first job at TechVision, a security software startup, marked the beginning of my true independence. For the first time, I was valued not just for my technical skills, but for my innovative thinking. When I suggested a new approach to their encryption protocols during my second month, the CTO actually implemented it and gave me credit in front of the entire team. "You've got a gift, Emilio," he told me afterward. "Don't be afraid to speak up." I moved into my own apartment in San Francisco, bought new furniture, and started building a life 3,000 miles away from my parents. We spoke infrequently, usually initiated by me, and their questions remained superficial. "How's the weather there? How's the job?" Nothing about my actual life, my happiness, my accomplishments. I was building financial independence, but part of me still hoped for their approval. I still called on holidays, still mentioned my achievements in emails. They rarely responded to, still sent cards on their birthdays that were never reciprocated. I was learning to live without their support, but the child in me who just wanted to be seen hadn't fully let go. The next 8 years saw my career trajectory rise faster than even I had anticipated. At TechVision, I quickly moved from junior developer to lead security architect, guiding the direction of our products and building a reputation in the industry. By 26, I was speaking at conferences and publishing articles in tech journals. My breakthrough came when I developed a new encryption algorithm that significantly improved processing speed without compromising security, something that had been considered nearly impossible in the field. The paper I published on this innovation caught attention across Silicon Valley. Within months, I was being headhunted by the biggest names in tech. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they all came calling with offers that made my salary at TechVision look like pocket change. After careful negotiation, I accepted a position at SecureNet, a mid-sized security firm, where I would have more creative control and a compensation package that included significant equity. My new role came with a corner office, a team of developers under my direction, and the freedom to pursue my own research alongside company projects. For the first time, I was being paid what I was worth and treated with the respect my expertise deserved. San Francisco became truly home during these years. I made friends among colleagues and in my apartment building. Weekend hikes in Marin County, pickup basketball games at the park, craft beer nights. With the engineering team, I built a social life that felt genuine and supportive. These people knew me, respected me, and sought out my company. Dating came next, though it didn't come easily. Years of emotional neglect had left me with walls that were difficult to lower. I went through a series of short relationships, unable to fully let anyone in. Then I met Alexandra, a UX designer at a partner company. She was brilliant, kind, and patient enough to see past my defenses. "You go quiet sometimes," she observed one night as we walked along the Embarcadero, "like you've retreated somewhere I can't follow." For the first time I found myself able to talk about my childhood, about the birthdays forgotten and the accomplishments ignored. Alexandra listened without judgment, then took my hand. "That must have been incredibly lonely," she said simply. "We dated for almost 2 years. She taught me how to be vulnerable, how to accept care from another person. But ultimately, my emotional walls proved too high even for her persistence." "I love you, Emilio," she said during our final conversation, "but I can't keep fighting to prove I won't disappear on you. At some point you have to believe that not everyone is like your parents." She was right, of course. After we broke up, I finally did what friends had been suggesting for years. I started therapy. Dr. Harrison specialized in childhood emotional neglect, and in our first session, she helped me name what I'd experienced. "What you're describing is a form of invisible trauma," she explained. "Just because there were no physical bruises doesn't mean you weren't hurt." Through weekly sessions, I began to understand how deeply my parents' neglect had shaped me, my perfectionism, my difficulty trusting others, my constant need to prove my worth through achievement. Most importantly, I began to separate my self-worth from their validation. During these years, my relationship with my parents remained distant and superficial. I called on holidays and occasionally visited during Christmas, sitting through dinners where conversation revolved around Heather's job at a prestigious law firm to her engagement to a surgeon, their new house in Connecticut. My own accomplishments, promotions, industry, awards, the apartment I'd bought in one of San Francisco's most desirable neighborhoods were acknowledged with polite nods before the subject changed back to more important matters. My 30th birthday marked a turning point. I called my parents that morning, hoping that perhaps a milestone birthday might merit special acknowledgement. "Oh, is that today?" my mother said. "Happy birthday, dear. Did you get the Christmas card we sent?" It was April. Their Christmas card had arrived 4 months earlier. "Listen, Emilio, we'd love to chat longer, but we're heading to the Hendersons' retirement party in about 20 minutes, my father interjected. "We should get ready." "Sure," I said, my voice flat. "Enjoy the party." After hanging up, I sat in my living room overlooking the San Francisco skyline and felt something shift inside me. I was 30 years old, successful by any measure, respected in my field, financially secure, and still chasing the approval of people who had never been able to give it. It was time to stop. From that day forward, I decided to focus entirely on building my own life and happiness without reference to my parents' validation. I reduced contact to obligatory holiday calls. I stopped mentioning my achievements. I invested more deeply in the relationships that actually nourished me, friends, colleagues, my therapy sessions with Dr. Harrison. I decided that if my family couldn't see my worth, I would surround myself with people who could. And more importantly, I would learn to see it myself. While my career at SecureNet was thriving, I had always harbored dreams of creating something truly my own. In the evenings and weekends, I began working on a personal project, a new type of security software that would revolutionize how companies protected their most sensitive data. The concept came to me during a conference when a speaker mentioned the increasing sophistication of cyber attacks targeting financial institutions. What if there was a way to create a security system that actually adapted in real time to new threats, learning from each attempted breach to strengthen its defenses? My apartment's spare bedroom became my lab. I covered the walls with whiteboards filled with algorithms and system architectures. For months, I worked nights and weekends fueled by coffee and the thrill of creation. The first 3 prototypes failed spectacularly. They were either too resource-intensive to be practical or couldn't adapt quickly enough to be effective. I nearly gave up after the 3rd failure. I remember sitting on my balcony at 3 in the morning, exhausted and frustrated, wondering if I was chasing an impossible dream. But something kept pulling me back to the problem. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. I was working late one Tuesday night when a simple solution to the processing problem suddenly became clear. We didn't need to analyze the entire system continuously. We could create a prioritization algorithm that would focus resources on the most vulnerable areas based on current threat profiles. I worked for 48 hours straight, barely stopping to eat or sleep. By Thursday morning, I had a working prototype that performed beyond my wildest expectations. When I ran the stress tests, it caught and adapted to 98% of simulated attacks, far beyond the industry standard of around 70%. This wasn't just a minor improvement. It was a paradigm shift in cybersecurity. I named it Adaptive Shield. The question now was what to do with it. The obvious path would be to develop it within SecureNet or sell the intellectual property to one of the tech giants. Either would mean a substantial bonus or licensing fees likely in the high six figures. But as I considered my options, I realized I wanted more than that. This was my creation, my vision, perhaps the most significant contribution I would ever make to the field. I didn't want to hand it over and watch someone else determine its future. I decided to take the biggest risk of my professional life. I would start my own company. The next few months were a whirlwind. I resigned from SecureNet, registered Adaptive Shield as a company, and began seeking seed funding. I created a detailed business plan and practiced my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. Then I began meeting with venture capitalists. The first 5 meetings ended with polite rejections. 2 speculative ones said, "Market not clearly defined," said another. I began to doubt my decision, wondering if I should have taken the safer route of selling the technology outright. Then came my meeting with Westlake Ventures. Marion Westlake, the founder, had built her reputation by backing technologies that others deemed too risky. Unlike the other VCs, she asked detailed technical questions that demonstrated a deep understanding of cybersecurity. At the end of my pitch, she leaned back in her chair and studied me. "This could fail spectacularly," she said bluntly. My heart sank. Or she continued, "It could transform the entire industry. I'm willing to bet on the latter. Let's talk terms." With Westlake's $5 million investment, Adaptive Shield officially launched. I hired a small team of brilliant engineers I'd worked with, previously rented modest office space in Oakland to keep costs down, and threw myself into developing the product for market. The early months were challenging beyond anything I'd experienced. There were technical setbacks, staffing issues, and moments of paralyzing self-doubt. I worked 18-hour days, sometimes sleeping on the office couch rather than going home. The weight of responsibility for my employees' livelihoods added pressure I'd never felt before. 6 months in, we were burning through cash faster than projected and still hadn't secured our first major client. I began to prepare myself for the possibility of failure, not just financial failure, but public failure in the industry where I'd built my reputation. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Through a former colleague, I secured a presentation slot with BankSecure, one of the largest financial security companies in the country. They were looking for new solutions after a high-profile breach had cost them millions. I knew this was potentially our make-or-break moment. I spent weeks preparing, refining our demo, anticipating every possible question. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early, set up my equipment, and then sat alone in the conference room, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. The presentation went flawlessly. When I demonstrated how Adaptive Shield had detected and neutralized their most recent breach in our simulation, a breach that had bypassed all their existing security, the room fell silent. "How soon can we implement this?" the CTO asked, breaking the silence. Within a month, BankSecure became our first client, signing a multi-year contract worth $12 million. The news spread throughout the industry. Suddenly, companies that had ignored my calls were reaching out, eager to schedule demonstrations. 8 months after that first contract with Adaptive Shield, now serving 15 major clients and growing rapidly, I received an email from Tech Giant, one of the world's largest technology corporations. They wanted to discuss a potential acquisition. I wasn't looking to sell, but agreed to the meeting out of curiosity. Their initial offer stunned me $12 million for the company and technology, with a guaranteed 5-year employment contract for me. It was life-changing money, but I knew the technology was worth more. After weeks of negotiation with Marion Westlake's guidance, we settled on $15 million with additional performance bonuses that could add another $5 million over 5 years. The day the money transferred to my account was surreal. I stared at the banking app on my phone, looking at a number that seemed impossible: $15,300,042.17. I had come from forgotten birthdays and rejected college tuition to this moment. Part of me wanted to call my parents immediately to finally prove my worth in the currency they might understand. But another part, the part healed through therapy and friendship and self-acceptance, knew that external validation wasn't the point. Instead, I celebrated quietly with my team, taking them all to dinner and announcing the bonuses they would each receive. I donated $1 million anonymously to MIT's scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in computer science. And I allowed myself one significant personal indulgence: a Tesla Model S Plaid custom-ordered in midnight blue with every available option. $98,000, an extravagance certainly, but one I could now afford. When the car was delivered, I felt a childlike excitement I hadn't experienced in years. It represented not just luxury, but achievement, tangible proof of how far I'd come through my own efforts. I took a photo of myself beside it, and on impulse posted it to my rarely used Instagram account with the caption, "Hard work, persistence, and believing in yourself, even when others don't, it all pays off eventually. Dream fulfilled." I didn't tag my family. I rarely posted anything, and they rarely engaged with my social media. I didn't expect them to see it at all. I was wrong. Despite my financial windfall, my lifestyle remained relatively modest. I kept my apartment, though I had it professionally redecorated. I updated my wardrobe with higher quality clothes, but nothing flashy. I invested most of the money, conservatively set up retirement accounts, and created a foundation to support tech education for underprivileged youth. The Tesla was my one obvious luxury, a personal reward for years of dedication. The day after posting the photo, I was working from home when my phone rang. Seeing my father's name on the screen was surprising enough. He almost never called me. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Emilio." My father's voice was tight, controlled in that way I recognized from childhood confrontations. "I just saw your post. The car." No greeting. No "how are you?" Just straight to the point. "Yes, I bought a Tesla," I replied evenly. "I've always wanted one." $98,000. He made it sound like an accusation. "Where did you get that kind of money? Are you in some kind of trouble?" The assumption that the only way I could afford such a car was through something illegal or dangerous was both hilarious and infuriating. In all the years I'd been building my career, through all the promotions and accomplishments I'd mentioned in passing during our infrequent calls, he had apparently formed no concept of my financial success. "I'm not in trouble, Dad. I'm doing well financially. My company was acquired recently." A pause. "What company? You never mentioned owning a company." "I've mentioned my work in cybersecurity many times," I said, unable to keep a hint of frustration from my voice. "I founded Adaptive Shield last year. Tech giant acquired us last month." Another long pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating, processing this new information about a son he barely knew. "Well," he finally said, his tone shifting to something I'd never heard directed at me before, something almost like respect. "That's impressive. Your mother and I had no idea you were involved in something so significant." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said quietly. "Clearly." He cleared his throat. "Listen, your mother and I think we should have a family meeting. We're concerned that you might need some financial guidance with this sudden windfall. It's important to make responsible decisions." I almost laughed out loud. After years of minimal interest in my life now they were concerned about my ability to handle money. I appreciate the concern, I said, keeping my voice level, but I have financial advisors. I'm managing fine. Still, he insisted family should discuss these things. Heather will be there too. She's very excited to hear about your success. We're thinking tomorrow evening at our house. Can you make it? The mention of Heather's excitement raised immediate red flags. In our infrequent interactions over the years, my sister had shown little interest in my career or life beyond superficial questions, quickly redirected to her own achievements. I'm in San Francisco, Dad. I can't just pop over for dinner. Oh. He sounded genuinely surprised, as if he'd forgotten where I lived. Well, perhaps next weekend then. This is important, Emilio. Family needs to stick together in times like these. Times like what? Times when one family member suddenly has money? The implication was clear, and it made my stomach turn. I'll check my calendar and let you know, I said noncommittally. After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone, a mix of emotions churning inside me. Less than 5 minutes later, it rang again, my mother this time. Emilio, dear, she began with unusual warmth. Your father just told me about your business success. Why didn't you tell us? We're so proud. Proud. After 32 years, the word I'd longed to hear as a child now felt hollow and calculated. It just happened recently, I replied. I've been busy with the transition. Well, it's wonderful news. Listen about this family meeting. Your father mentioned, I really think you should come. We have so much to catch up on, and there are important family matters to discuss. What family matters? I asked directly. She hesitated. Well, various things. Heather's been having some challenges with the mortgage on their new house since Thomas's practice has been slow to take off. And your father's considering early retirement. Family should support each other through these transitions, don't you think? And there it was, the real reason for the sudden interest in my life. Not pride in my accomplishments, not a desire to repair our relationship, but the potential financial benefit I might provide to the family that had never supported me. I'll think about it, I said, ending the call shortly after. Within the hour, a text arrived from Heather. Oh my God, baby bro, a Tesla. Didn't know you were secretly loaded. Can't wait to catch up at Mom and Dad's. By the way, did they mention, we're looking at private schools for the twins, so expensive these days. The transparency was almost refreshing. No pretense, just immediate hints about financial needs. I spent the evening in a strange emotional state, simultaneously angry, hurt, vindicated, and anxious. Part of me wanted to ignore them all, to continue building my life without their belated and clearly self-interested attention. But another part, perhaps, the boy who still hungered for recognition, wanted to face them, to finally speak truths long buried. After a restless night, I made my decision. I would attend their family meeting, but on my terms. I booked a flight to Boston for the following weekend and reserved a hotel room near my parents' house. I wouldn't stay with them, wouldn't give them the opportunity to slip back into old patterns of control. I texted my father, I'll be there Saturday at 6 p.m. One evening only, I fly back Sunday. His response came quickly. Wonderful. Your mother is already planning a special dinner. We can't wait to hear all about your success. I put down my phone and looked out my window at the San Francisco skyline. For years I had fantasized about a moment when my parents would finally see me, finally value me. Now that moment was approaching, but the circumstances filled me with a complex mix of anticipation and dread. They wanted to talk about money. I wanted to talk about years of emotional neglect. I suspected we were heading for a collision that had been 3 decades in the making. The flight to Boston gave me time to prepare mentally for what was coming. I rehearsed what I might say, how I would respond to various scenarios. By the time I picked up my rental car, I'd specifically requested a luxury model, a small act of defiance against years of being treated as less than I felt, centered and clear about my boundaries. I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 6, parking the Tesla prominently in the driveway. The home looked exactly as it always had, the same neatly trimmed hedges, the same faded welcome mat, the same brass knocker on the door that had never quite been fixed to hang straight. Before I could knock, the door swung open. My mother stood there wearing a dress I'd never seen before, and more makeup than she usually wore. "Emilio," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt unfamiliar and stiff. "Look at you, and look at that car. Come in, come in." My father appeared behind her, extending his hand for a formal handshake. "Son, good to see you. Impressive vehicle." The house smelled of pot roast and fresh paint. I noticed new curtains in the living room and fresh flowers on the coffee table, efforts that had never been made for my previous visits. "Emilio." My sister's voice rang out as she emerged from the kitchen. "There's my successful brother." Heather looked much the same, though her designer clothes and jewelry suggested a lifestyle that might be stretching her finances. She hugged me with unusual enthusiasm. "The twins are with Thomas's parents tonight," she explained. "We wanted adult time to really talk." I nodded, noticing how all three of them kept glancing toward the windows toward the Tesla parked outside. "Dinner's almost ready," my mother announced. "Emilio, would you like a tour? We've made some updates since you were last here." The updates were minimal: a new coat of paint in the guest bathroom, new bedding in what had been my childhood room, but was now clearly used for storage. What struck me was how the house remained a shrine to Heather's achievements. Her trophies still lined the mantel. Photos of her graduation, wedding, and children dominated the walls. The only evidence of my existence was a single school photo, probably from 10th grade, tucked into the corner of a crowded bookshelf. Dinner was a strange performance. My mother had prepared all my childhood favorites, or what she thought were my favorites, though she'd confused several with Heather's preferences. My father opened an expensive bottle of wine he'd apparently been saving for a special occasion. The conversation was even more surreal. They asked questions about my company, my role at Tech Giant, my apartment in San Francisco, subjects they had shown zero interest in previously. My father nodded with exaggerated impression at technical details he clearly didn't understand. My mother repeatedly mentioned friends whose children were also in computers, but not at your level, of course. Heather was the most transparent, peppering the conversation with references to the twins' expensive preschool, their house maintenance issues, and how Thomas was still building his practice after 3 years. I answered their questions politely, but briefly volunteering little additional information. I was waiting, observing this performance with a detached curiosity, wondering when they would get to the real purpose of this gathering. It came as my mother served dessert, an elaborate cake from an expensive bakery across town. So Emilio, my father, began setting down his fork with deliberate precision. "We wanted to talk to you about this new financial situation of yours." I took a sip of water. "What about it?" "Well, it's a significant change. Sudden wealth can be challenging to manage properly. Your mother and I have been thinking that as a family we should discuss how these resources might best be utilized." "For the family," my mother added quickly. "Families should support each other." I set down my glass slowly. "And how exactly did you envision this family support working?" My father leaned forward, warming to his topic. "Well, there are several considerations. Heather and Thomas have the twins' education to think about. College funds need to be established early to maximize growth." Heather nodded eagerly. "Private school tuition is insane these days, and we're looking at having to renovate the house to accommodate my home office." And of course, my mother continued, "Your father and I are thinking about retirement. Our savings aren't quite what we'd hoped with having helped Heather through Harvard and the wedding and helping with the down payment on their house." I listened in silence as they laid out what amounted to a financial wish list: help with Heather's mortgage, educational funds for the twins' renovations for their house, supplemental retirement income for my parents. Not once did anyone ask what I planned to do with my money, what dreams I might have for my own future. When they finally paused, expecting my response, I asked a simple question: when was my last birthday? The question clearly caught them off guard. My mother blinked in confusion. Your birthday. Yes. When was it? What did we do to celebrate? My father frowned. It was. In the spring, wasn't it, April? April 17th, I confirmed. And what did we do? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. Well, I'm sure we called. You didn't, I said calmly. In fact, you haven't remembered my birthday with so much as a phone call in 3 years. The last time you remembered was when I happened to call you on that day about something else, and you realized mid-conversation what day it was. We've been very busy, Emilio, my father said defensively, with the twins and... You've been busy my entire life, I interrupted, my voice still measured. Too busy to attend my high school graduation properly. Too busy to help with my college tuition, though you paid for Heather's entirely. Too busy to visit me more than once in San Francisco, though you've been to New York to see Heather 6 times in the last 2 years. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I have texts here from holidays, from achievements, from moments when I reached out to share something important. Most went unanswered. The responses I did get were perfunctory at best. I set the phone on the table and looked at each of them in turn. For 32 years I have been an afterthought in this family. The extra child, the one whose accomplishments didn't merit, celebration whose pain didn't warrant comfort, whose existence was acknowledged only when convenient. My mother's eyes had filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from genuine remorse or simply discomfort at being confronted. That's not true, Emilio. We love both our children equally. Do you? I asked quietly. Let's test that. Heather, what did Mom and Dad get you for your 30th birthday? My sister shifted uncomfortably. They threw me a surprise party and gave me the pearl necklace that had been Grandma's. I nodded. And for my 30th, I got a text message 2 days late. Dad, what was my thesis topic at MIT? My father's face flushed. Well, it was something in computer science, obviously. You don't know because you never asked. Mom, who was Alexandra? My mother looked blank. Was she a friend from college? She was the woman I dated for 2 years, the only person I've ever told I loved. I mentioned her multiple times during our calls. I even sent you a picture of us once. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. My father predictably moved to counterattack. This is ridiculous, Emilio. So we missed a few birthdays, forgot a girlfriend's name. That doesn't negate years of providing for you, raising you. Providing the bare minimum, I corrected. Raising me alongside the child you actually wanted to focus on. I'm not saying you were monsters. I'm saying you were emotionally absent from my life in ways that were profoundly damaging. Heather, sensing the conversation moving away from financial matters, attempted to redirect. Look, we all have our issues with Mom and Dad, but we're family, and families support each other. Right now, Thomas and I really need. No, I said firmly. What's happening right now is transparent and frankly insulting. For decades I existed on the periphery of this family. I built my career without your interest or support. I healed from the pain of being the forgotten child without your awareness or concern. And now that I have money, now that I have something you want, suddenly, I'm the son and brother you've always loved. My mother began to cry in earnest now. How can you say such hurtful things after all we've done? After all you've done. I repeated, my control finally slipping as years of suppressed hurt surged forward. Let me tell you what you've done. You've taught me that my worth as a person was conditional. You've shown me that my achievements meant nothing unless they served your narrative. You've demonstrated that in your version of family, some children matter more than others. I stood up from the table. I didn't come here for a performative family reunion. I came because I needed you all to hear this truth finally. I am not your backup plan. I am not your financial safety net. I am a person who deserved to be loved and seen for who I was, not what I could provide. My father's face had turned dark with anger. So that's it. You come here to throw our failures in our faces and refuse to help your family when we need it. Is that who you've become? I looked at him steadily. I've become someone who understands what real family means. It means celebrating each other's joys. It means showing up consistently, not just when there's something to gain. It means remembering birthdays and caring about heartbreaks and being interested in each other's lives. I walked to the door, then turned back. If you want to know who I've become, I'm someone who finally understands his own worth, and it has nothing to do with a $98,000 car. With that, I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence behind me. As I drove away in the Tesla that had precipitated this long-overdue confrontation, I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting a wound finally lanced after festering for decades. The drive back to my hotel was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursing through my system after the confrontation I'd spent most of my life avoiding. I'd said things I'd been holding back for decades, truths that had lived in the shadows of my mind, shaping my actions without my full awareness. Once in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, emotions washing over me in waves. There was anger, certainly, and lingering hurt. But there was also an unexpected feeling of lightness, of release. I had finally stopped pretending that the dynamic with my family was normal or acceptable. I had named it for what it was. I took out my phone and saw multiple missed calls and texts from my parents and Heather. I wasn't ready to engage again so soon. Instead, I called Jason, my college roommate who had remained a close friend through the years. You actually said all that he asked after I recounted the evening. Damn, Emilio. That's been a long time coming. Too long, maybe, I admitted. I don't know if I handled it right. There's no right way to confront years of emotional neglect, Jason said. The important thing is you stood up for yourself. How do you feel? I considered the question seriously. Shaken, sad, but also free. Like I've been carrying this weight of trying to earn their approval, and I've finally put it down. That's exactly what you've done, Jason affirmed, and it's about time. We talked for nearly an hour, his steady friendship, a reminder of the genuine connections I'd built outside my family of origin. By the time we hung up, my breathing had steadied, and I felt centered enough to check the messages from my family. My father's text was predictably defensive. Your outburst tonight was unfair and hurtful. We've always done our best as parents. When you've calmed down and are ready to apologize, we can discuss moving forward as a family. No acknowledgement of my feelings, no reflection on the patterns I'd pointed out, just an expectation that I would eventually fall back in line. My mother's message struck a slightly different tone. Emilio, I'm very upset by what happened tonight. I had no idea you felt so overlooked all these years. I need time to process everything you said. Please call when you're ready to talk. At least there was a hint of recognition there, though I wasn't sure how deep it went or how long it would last. Heather's text was the most surprising. Hey, what you said tonight about being the forgotten child. I never saw it that way, but looking back, I can see some truth there. I was so caught up in the attention I got that I never noticed what you weren't getting. That's on me too. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Her message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Of all the responses, hers contained the most genuine reflection, the most willingness to consider another perspective. It wasn't a complete understanding, but it was a start. I slept poorly that night. My dreams filled with fragments of childhood memories. Forgotten birthdays, empty chairs at achievements. The constant sense of being secondary. I woke early and checked out of the hotel, changing my flight to return to San Francisco that morning rather than waiting until evening as originally planned. I needed to get back to my real life, to the world I had built for myself. Over the following weeks, I maintained my distance, taking time to process the confrontation and its aftermath. I continued my therapy sessions with Dr. Harrison, working through the complex emotions the family meeting had stirred up. You've done something very difficult, she told me. You've broken a family pattern that's existed your entire life. That takes tremendous courage. I'm not sure it changed anything, I admitted, except maybe making things worse. Change doesn't happen in a single conversation, she reminded me. You've planted seeds of awareness. What grows from them is up to each individual, but you've done your part by speaking your truth. A month after the confrontation, my father sent a brief email. Your mother and I have been discussing your visit. While we don't agree with how you characterized our parenting, we recognize that we may have had different approaches with you and Heather. If you'd like to have a calmer conversation about this, we're open to that. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was more reflection than I'd ever seen from him. I responded that I appreciated their willingness to talk and would reach out when I felt ready. My mother began sending occasional texts, nothing dramatic, just small connections. A photo of their garden, a question about the weather in San Francisco, a mention of a computer article that made her think of me. Small steps, but consistent ones. The most significant change came with Heather. 2 months after our confrontation, she called me directly. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she said without preamble, about how things were growing up, about how much attention I got, and how little you got. I talked to Thomas about it, and he helped me see how unfair it was. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely moved by her reflection. I also realized something else, she continued. When I called after seeing your Tesla, I immediately jumped to how you could help us financially. I didn't even ask about your accomplishment itself, how you built a company, how hard you must have worked. That was shitty of me, and I'm sorry. Her apology, freely given without excuses, felt like the first authentic connection we'd had in years. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. I'd like to know more about your company, she said. About your life in San Francisco. About you, really, if you're willing to share. That call marked the beginning of a new relationship with my sister, not perfect, but evolving in a more balanced direction. We began having regular video calls. She introduced me properly to her twins, and I became a real uncle to them rather than a distant figure they barely knew. With my parents, progress was slower and less certain. I established clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't discuss, particularly regarding money. I made it clear that our relationship needed to be built on genuine interest and connection, not financial expectations. 3 months after the confrontation, I agreed to a video call with both of them. It was awkward and tense at times, but we managed to have a conversation that didn't descend into defensiveness or accusations. My father actually asked about my work with genuine curiosity, and my mother showed me photos of her garden without immediately pivoting to talk about Heather. In my own life, I continued building connections that nourished me. I deepened friendships with colleagues and neighbors. I joined a hiking group where I met people who shared my love of nature. I even began dating again, cautiously but with a greater capacity for vulnerability than before. The foundation I had established to support tech education for underprivileged youth became a significant focus. I volunteered regularly, mentoring young people who reminded me of myself at that age, bright, eager, but lacking support. Helping them access opportunities and watching their confidence grow became one of my greatest joys. On my 33rd birthday, I received a surprise, a handwritten card from my parents that arrived on the actual day. Inside, my mother had written, "We are trying to do better, Emilio. Happy birthday to our son who has accomplished so much through his own determination and brilliance. We are proud of the man you've become." It wasn't a complete healing of decades of neglect, but it was a step one I could acknowledge without letting it determine my happiness. That evening, I celebrated with a group of close friends at my favorite restaurant. Jason had flown in from Connecticut as a surprise. As we shared good food and laughter, I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who saw me clearly and valued me for exactly who I was. This, I realized, was the most important lesson of my journey. Family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's created through choice, built with people who demonstrate through consistent actions that you matter to them. I had spent years seeking validation from people who couldn't or wouldn't provide it, while overlooking the genuine connections I was building elsewhere. True healing didn't come from finally receiving parental approval or from proving my worth through financial success. It came from recognizing my own inherent value and surrounding myself with people who saw it too. It came from breaking patterns, rather than perpetuating them, from setting boundaries that protected my well-being, from extending forgiveness without requiring perfection. The journey wasn't over. Relationships with my birth family would continue to evolve with steps forward and occasional steps back. But I was no longer defined by their perception of me. I had built a life rich in meaning, purpose, and authentic connection, a life that was wholly mine. As I look back on that pivotal confrontation now, I see it as the moment I finally released the need for external validation and embraced my own worth. The Tesla that prompted it all sits in my garage, just a car in the end. The true luxury I've found is the freedom to define family success and happiness on my own terms. Have you ever had to create your own sense of family or worth when the people who should have provided it couldn't? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the most important relationships are the ones we choose for ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic life journeys. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it.